So today we are, oh, normally I put the name of the lesson here. Oh, I did, look at that. Okay, trust yourself. So we're gonna talk about class methods today. And so we're gonna start this off. We want to explain the difference between class and instance methods. Probably up to this point, we've been working primarily with instance methods. So we want to discuss this idea of what is a class method. How could we use it to even create instances of a class? We want to be able to distinguish between class and instance methods that have the same name, and that will go along with exploring the syntax. We're also going to look at a little bit of importing CSV data as well as it relates to these class methods. I should ask this at the beginning. Can I get a thumbs up if you can hear me and see my screen? Awesome, perfect. Just want to make sure I'm not talking to myself here. All right, so let's take a couple of minutes and do a quick warm up. So I already mentioned these vocab words, but let's take about 5 minutes, and I'd love for you to just reflect on this code. It's not a lot of code, but reflect on these two questions that are listed here below. So go ahead, take about 4 to 5 minutes to reflect on that, either in a journal or in a text editor. Either way is fine. Okay, so let's come back together. I think I got my headphones figured out. And let's, up until this point, we have primarily used our classes as blueprints for instances of the class, right? So if we've got a name class or a team class, for instance, we would use that class to create instances, or we would create instances of that class, and then that class would respond to any kind of methods we have defined within that team class. So it acts as a blueprint. So that's where we define methods. We store state for those instances in our instance variables. And then once we instantiate those instances, we can access all that data. So now in Ruby, classes are also objects themselves. Right, so we might have like a team object or an instance, but the class itself is also an object. So we can actually call methods on those classes. Because if you remember, however we call a method on an object. So our user class here is its own object. And so there's going to be some differences on how we define those and how we use those, and when we would use an instance method versus a class method. What responsibility should an instance have versus a class? So we're actually going to do a little exploration. I'm going to drop this in your Slack channel. I think it'll be a little easier for you to read. And this will be a solo exploration. We'll spend about another 5 minutes on this. So I did just drop it in your Slack channel. You don't need to necessarily copy the code, but you sure can in a text editor. But I want you to think about this class, this social media user class, and think about what you would expect each method to return and why. So definitely you can do some pseudocoding in there if you've got time. Not real code, just do some like pseudocoding, or just, just normal words, sorry, just writing on like what the logic might be to accomplish that method. So take another 5 minutes to go through this exploration. Not want to cooperate at all. My headphones keep going off and my internet dropped, and it's going to be a fun day. So let's talk a little bit about these methods. So you can see here, and we'll talk more about the syntax, but you can see we have some differences in how these methods are even defined. So that's an indicator that something different may be going on. But I would love to hear a little bit about your thoughts on what each of these methods might do. So Saren, I don't know, would you be willing to come off mute and help explain what this def rating method, what you would expect that method to return and what it's doing?
Yeah, so I would expect it to return whatever rating is associated with what is it, the social media user, but it would just return the rating and not the ID, or it doesn't really care about anything else. So just rating.
Perfect. And how would we call that method?
You would call just self or whatever instance it is dot rating.
Well, so let's pretend, sorry, let me rephrase my question. So let's pretend we're outside of this class, like maybe in a runner file or another class or something down here on line 58. So if I had an instance of social media user, so we'll say Bob is a good user. So we'll do social media user dot new. We know that, oh, this is not a Ruby file. That's why it's not doing it. He needs an ID. We'll say he's the third user, and he gives his rating out of 10 is 10. Right? So now how would we call this rating method?
I would call it as bob.rating.
Wonderful. Yep. So we are calling this method on an instance of the social media class. Okay. And that's just something we want to notice. Okay. Let's pause on that thought and then go to the next one. Thank you, Saren. If Garrett, if you would love to come off mute, I just put a lot of emotion on you. If you would like to come off mute and talk about what this def self.most popular, what do you think that should do?
So you would, instead of calling it on like an instance of that class, you would just call it on the social media user class. So you do like social media user dot most popular.
Like this?
Yeah.
Okay. And what would you expect this method to do or return?
I guess it depends like what's in that actual method.
Sure, it definitely depends. But remember, with Ruby, we try to be very descriptive about our methods and our variable names so that the user can just make some assumptions just based off of the method name.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So it'd just be like the most popular social media user.
Yeah, definitely. So it would be the most popular social media instance.
Okay.
Social media user instance. Yeah, perfect. Thank you for sharing. And so we've got a little bit of a difference here. You've seen us calling a method before on the class when we do something like that. Oh, well, actually, I already did it right here. Right here, right? We're calling .new on an actual class. And so that is a class method. And same here, we can define our own class methods for classes that will give us different information. In this case, it's going to give us the instance, the social media user instance that is the most popular, determined by whatever code we put inside here. Okay, so let's go through two more. Travis, would you come off mute and talk a little bit about this add post method and how that's acting?
Yeah, it looks like its purpose is to take post as an argument, and I would assume post is like some kind of a caption or like a description or something, or like oh no, social media. We're talking about social media, so like a status update or something like that. And it takes that, and I'm guessing puts it, it would place it within the class or within the instance of that class under like variable post. So it's like it's adding a script to the class instance.
Okay, yeah, maybe. There's a lot of stuff that could potentially be going on in this method. How would I call this method?
So if we've already created Bob as an instance, or an instance of it, then bob.addPost, and then within the parentheses, some kind of script.
Yeah. So who does this post belong to?
Bob.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Travis.
Yeah.
So this is an instance, right? We're calling add post to Bob, right? How about, why would we not have this defined? Just your thoughts. I know like we really haven't even breached the subject yet, but what are your thoughts? Why did we make add post an instance method as opposed to a class method? Does anyone want to share some thoughts on the reasoning there?
Will you restate
That
Yes, I will restate the question. So why is add post? Well, I should clarify this first too. Add post is what is an instance method, right? Because we're calling it on an instance. When the self dot, and we'll talk about the syntax in a minute, but when you see that self dot in front of a method, that indicates that this is a class method. Okay, so add post we can see is an instance method. So now why did we decide, because whenever we write our code, we get to make these decisions. Why did we decide to make add post an instance method as opposed to a class method? Anyone want to venture a guess? Hope, were you good?
Oh,
I was going to suggest that it's because the post is made by and or belongs to a specific user.
Yeah, I think that is a great reason, right? Because if we have another social media user like Jane over here, I'll just give her some numbers, right? If we somehow now, we're able to look at all these posts, we would see that this specific post was done by Bob, not Jane, not any other instance, only Bob. So we make it an instance method because it pertains specifically, like you said, Hope, specifically to this specific instance of the social media class. Okay, all right. Now, how about this self.find ID? Leah, would you like to come off mute and share with me what this method would be doing?
Yeah, I think that this method would run on the social media user class and would probably return an instance based on that ID that's passed in.
Yeah, I think you're right on with that. So we know it's an we know it's a class method because of the self dot in the definition of the method. And so we call it on the actual class, we pass it an argument. And Leah, I agree with you. I would think that this method would return an instance, a social media user instance, where this ID matches. So in this case, this would return specifically the Jane social media user instance. Okay. All right. So, and now, thank you so much, Leah. Anyone want to think a little bit, or actually think to yourself for a minute, why did we make this a class method as opposed to an instance method? See if you can explain that to yourself. Would someone like to come off mute and share the reasoning on why this is a class method?
I would say it's probably the class method because you want it to be able to find any instance of a social media user, not just one.
Yeah, not just like a specific one.
Mm-hmm.
But, well, we kind of are looking for a specific one because we're passing it this specific.
Yeah, but if it was only on the instance of one, you wouldn't be able to see the other social media users.
Ooh, yes, that is great, Austin. Thank you so much. So Austin said something important there about not being able to see the other instances. So think about this social media user class as a whole. Now, probably, I don't know, just thinking about like social media in the real world, like how many instances of social media user are there? I don't know, 1 million? I don't have no idea, to be honest, but irrelevant. So there's so many, but the cat social media user instance doesn't know about all the other social media instances out there. Cat being my name, Cat, not an actual cat, right? But the social media class itself, you can kind of think of it as like a container. The class knows about all the instances of itself. Okay, so the social media class knows about all the instances. So if we want to find a specific instance, based on some criteria like their ID or maybe one of the posts that they did. We can't ask a specific instance. We can't say, Danny, please find me the social media user who has an ID of 5, because the Danny social media user will say, I have no idea. I only know that my ID is 7. So we need to go to the class itself and say, okay, social media user class, please give me the user that is associated with this specific attribute. And because the class knows about all the instances, it can find that information for us. Is this feeling a little like meta right now?
No, we call .self basically to have a broader reach to maybe find a specific something versus looking at a specific something, trying to find a broader audience of that thing.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
have a quick question.
Yeah.
So if you did like, I'm thinking of the ad post, if you did like self dot announcement, would that do it, put an announcement to all of the instances? Or like self dot ad post, would that do an ad post to all of the instances?
Right,
So like if
exactly.
an announcement method, just do self dot announcement and all of the instances would get the announcement.
Yeah, you could think of it that way. So like, yeah, if we did have, say, a method like this, right? If we assigned a method called post as a class method, then you're right, it would probably do some kind of post for the entire, for every instance that exists within it. Or would send that message. I don't know, we'll look at some more examples to hopefully clear this out. So, but let's shift gears just a little bit right now and talk about the syntax that I think that these examples help demonstrate that. So again, I'll reiterate, when we are defining a method inside of our class and we want it to be called on the class itself, we're going to use this syntax with the self dot and then the method name. Okay, and then when we are outside of the class, like in a runner file or in another class file, we call that method or invoke that method by calling the name of the class dot the name of the class method. Okay, so let's say I've got a greeter class here, right? So if we've got this greeter class, here I've defined a method, a class method, right? And so if I wanted to call that method, how would I do that? Sorry, I was kind of just asking the ethers. But like we just looked at, we would call the name of the class and then the name of the method we defined as a class method. Where's my terminal? Other questions right now about the syntax? Okay. Oh my goodness. Sorry, my headphones just keep disconnecting. Can you still hear me okay right now?
Yeah.
All right. All right. So let's talk a little bit more about like why we would define a class method versus an instance method. So there's a lot of functionality that we might want to ascribe to the class over a specific instance. So the class might like track information about all of the instances, or make it so that the class could be in charge of creating instances of itself. Because sometimes just calling .new might not be enough, and there might need to be other things that happened or that happen, and whose responsibility do we want these things to be? So for example, let's do I want to go through this one? Or let's do a user. Okay, let's say we have a user class. I wrote a test for our user class. Let me expand this a little to help illustrate a little bit of this point. Okay, so
let's say we have a user class and maybe we need to instantiate a collection of users all at the same time. What we want to think about is whose responsibility should it be to actually go through this collection and create all of the users? Do we want to have that functionality be a piece of the runner file? Or maybe there's another class that can control this instantiation. One of the design decisions you could make is having the class itself handle instantiating itself. Okay, so if you look at my test here, I've got some users. Well, actually, they're not users yet. It's just an array with hashes with their names, so some details about them. Let me make this a little bigger. I know I want to have a class method called create multiple users, and it should take in this array of hashes, and then the class is responsible for going through these and making each of these its own instance of user. Okay, so actually what I would love for you to do is see if you can write this method. Just try it. Even if you just get the skeleton of it, that is okay. So let's just spend even just about 3 minutes. You don't have this code. That's okay. So you're not going to be able to pry in it. So just kind of jot it down what you think this method would look like.
Kat, could you reiterate what method we're making?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're focused on this test right here, the test that can create multiple users, right? And so actually, I'm not going to say too much because I want you to read this test and see if you can write the code to match this test, to make this test pass. Okay, but this is the method that you're kind of focused on.
Okay, I stopped it before the obnoxious beeping started. So let's come back together. And Tyler, if you would like to come off mute because you wanted to put a pin on my chair.
Just as I thanked you for not buzzing me.
Oh, so I have the chat
So
closed
loud.
now, so that's okay. But if you want to help write, and no matter how far you get, that's totally okay.
Sure. So, I mean, I'm still not quite understanding this and cheated a little bit and looked at the notes.
Okay.
So, I mean, all I can really give you is what I'm reading here, to be honest.
Yeah, let's start. Tyler, how would I even, let's look first, okay, at this, and I'm sorry to put you on the spotlight, but sometimes it's easier to have a conversation with someone about this. So if we're looking at this test, what can you already tell me just from the syntax about what kind of method this create multiple users method is?
A class method.
Perfect. So let's start there. Let's just define this class method.
Okay. Def self dot create multiple users.
Yeah.
With the argument users.
Perfect. Oops. Oh gosh, needs more screen real estate.
And then we want to iterate through that.
Yeah. So your first step is done though, right? Like you did define now a class method called create multiple users that takes an argument. So great. And then you're saying the next step, we want to iterate through because right, we know we've got an array. So it makes sense to iterate. What did you try a little bit here?
So users dot map do user. And then this is where I don't really understand when we call the class method. I'm still.
This is a good one. This is right, because this I think is where it can get confusing because this is kind of new. So thank you so much, Tyler. All right, so let's explore this really quick. After we explore this and finish this method, we will take a POM. So let's run, where do I have this? Ruby. Okay, so if we run that, we are in our pry now. So I can see my block variable user is just a hash with a name key and then a string. Well, I know that in order to instantiate a new user instance, I need to call good old .new, right? So, but for .new, if we look at our initialize, I need to pass it a name of a string, okay? So I know I need to call .new, I know I need to pass it a string. How can I combine those details to get me some code? Like what can I type here in my pry that would accomplish this? And anyone can come off mute to share.
Hey, Kat.
Buddy. Yeah.
You could, in user, just put user.new and pass it the argument user.
Well, I can't pass
it. Or is it the bracket? Sorry, say again. I interrupted you.
No, say more. Keep going.
So it's a hash. And so, ooh, I like that, Travis. Thank you. Thanks for the lifeline. User.values.
Okay, what does user.values return though? It returns an array, right? So what I want with user.new, right, I want to pass it a string. So you're on track here. I've got a hash. So how do I access the value if I know the key is going to be name?
You would put user bracket name within the parentheses of user.new.
You got it. Right? So what this is going to do, it's going to evaluate this argument first. User name should return the string of cat. So then that string is going to be passed into,
sorry,
it's okay. It passed into user.new to actually instantiate a new user instance. Okay. And if we look here at this hash over in the test, we've got some consistency with the keys. So we can count on there being a key of name. So we just kind of played with the code we want here. So literally we could just copy this. Will it copy paste successfully from my terminal? I don't know. Yeah, it looks like it might have, right? And now remember here too, we want it to return the array of the new user instances. And I can see that this is not the best test, just putting that out there. I should be iterating over this return value to make sure every instant or every element of my return array is an instance of user. But I broke it down a little bit here so you can see I do expect that first element to be a user instance. There should be 3 of them. The first one should be cat. Okay, and so it was a great instinct, Tyler, to use map because we know map returns our transformed array. And then here, this is where I want to really call out that we can call other methods from inside the block. And it's okay if they're class methods. I actually do have some redundancy here, but that's okay. Let's do this really quick. I want to actually put my pry in here so we can see what this new users ends up being. Okay, so I am now in my test so I can see what the return value of my method is. So new users, awesome, is an array of user instances. So I've now given this responsibility of taking a collection of information and instantiating a bunch of users. I've given this responsibility to the user class itself. Questions?
I have a question. So to create a more robust test for that, could you say new users dot each do assert instance of user, so that it'll go through each one?
Exactly, right? So if I put this up there and then just do user like that. Oh wait, well that'll give me a bunch of instances. There's a lot of ways you could do this. Like I could, instead of a dot each, I could do like a dot all and assert that the dot all returns true. So if we test this now, oh, my pry is still in there. We hopefully, oops. Oh, I commented out the wrong thing, friends. Awesome. So it looks like we're still good with that. I would have expected this to actually have more assertions. Okay, well, I will look at this. I do want to give a palm though, and then we'll come back for more questions, okay? So let's take 5 minutes. So at 1:47, we'll come back. All right, so we'll come back together, and I just want to point out, I actually misread my test here. I do have 7 assertions, which is what I would have expected since we have 3 elements here. So this should run 3 times, so we should have 3 assertions from that. I was seeing the 2 dots and forgot I just have 2 tests, so that did work. Awesome. All right, what other questions do you have about this, about the syntax, about how this works, about why we would do it this way? And I just want to remind you, I don't have the chat open. Only when I get kicked out of the room, I open the chat. No questions?
Hey, Kat.
Yeah.
Just for giggles, I had an idea. I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind trying it out.
Let's do it.
On line 10, instead of user bracket name, and I understand this might not be preferred, but what about user dot values dot join?
So that could work. The only thing you run into is that what if there was more values in this hash, right? When we, so that would work, right? Because dot values is going to return you an array, and dot join will make all those elements into a single string. But if we had something else in here like age, I'm 25, then that would create a little bit of an issue with the name. So
Gotcha.
So let's I love that you're exploring and experimenting with different ways of solving that. But when we can be more specific, let's err on the side of specificity.
For sure.
That's a
Cool.
word.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, great question.
So just to be clear, what would happen if you got rid of self?
Oh, that's a good question. So let's run that and run our tests, right? So we've got a error, undefined method, create multiple users for user class, right? So that you've seen this error before, undefined method, but it says for user, and then it breaks it down to like the actual instance. So now, right here, it's expecting a method that is defined as a class method for the user class. So it's looking through this class, the blueprint, and not finding that. So it's saying you don't have a class method. So you can't call this method on the actual class. Great question. Oh, am I recording? Yes. Okay, cool. All right, should we explore some other scenarios? Then you'll get lots of time to practice this. Let's go back to this greeter class. And I don't have a test file for this one, so we'll just create some instances down here. Can I close this user class? Thumbs up, down? Okay, let me know if you need to see it again. So let's talk a little bit about, I like that we were exploring the naming of it and the syntax, so I want to explore that a little bit more. So what happens if I also create a method that, like this? What might go inside this method? Angela, if you want to come off mute, and I know this is a very vague question, but what do you think like might go inside of this method? And the greeter, so greeters like someone, you know, when you walk into a restaurant, they say hello, and they've got a name tag on, and they should introduce themselves to someone who walks in, right? Like, hey, I'm Angela. So what might go inside this method?
So since that's an instance method, you can do puts.
I'm just going to take the puts out.
Okay, so you could say, hello, my name is, and then do, what's it called, string interpolation? So
Perfect.
Yeah, and then name.
I love it. Awesome. Thank you so much for helping. Right. And this is what we would expect, right? Because if a specific greeter instance is saying hello, they might want to introduce themselves. Whereas if the entire greeter class itself is saying hello for some reason, they're not going to break it down by their name. So how would we call these things? Let's see. What do I want to do here? Well, let's call greeter. We know to call a instance method, a class method, we would do it like this. Let's create a greeter. Greeter, oops. He needs a name. And then Bob can also say hello. Okay. So, oh, I see why I had the puts here. So it'll actually output. So I'm going to run this file now. What do you think I'm going to get an error? Do you think this one will print out, that one will print out, all of them will print out? Make a guess in your head right now what you think will happen when I run this file. And so the class is up here, right? So it'll just run this code. What did I call it? Okay, everyone have a guess in their head? What's going to happen? Awesome. Is that what you thought was going to happen? So it looks like it called it in order and executed those methods. So first we called the class method, and it went and found the class method. And then it went and found the instance method, and printed that method. It executed that method. Okay, so the illustration today is that you can have a class method and an instance method called the same name, right? Because like kind of like that error illustrated that we just saw, Ruby will know to go to your class, your blueprint, and find the definition specifically, whether we called the method on a class or if we called that method on an instance. Okay.
I have a question, Kat.
Yes.
I keep looking at this and thinking about Snapchat for some reason, and I'm not a big fan of that platform. Like, I really don't understand it, but I wonder sometimes if the like greeter say hello is when like the platform is greeting you, and so like all of us get like, because we're all essentially users, we're all getting the like Happy Mother's Day or like Happy
Like the
New
mass
Year.
emails.
Yeah, like yes, exactly.
Yeah, I think so. I think that would be a fair assumption to make. I think the other thing, like a way to think about class methods too and their functionality is if we want to do something with all the instances as a whole or to all of the instances, we want to go to the class to perform that action. So like, for example, let's say we wanted all the greeters to say hello whenever someone like walks in. So how can we accomplish that? That's a fun one. So since we want to kind of have every instance of greeter have an action, we're going to make this a class method. Okay, so we're going to do self dot, let's call this all say hello. All. So I've got to pass. Okay, interesting. I've got to pass it some greeters, right? And then, actually, let's build that first so I can illustrate this a little better. Let's make some more greeters. Jane is in there. And I don't know, names are hard. June. And April. Okay. So we've got a couple greeter instances here, and we're going to all say hello, right? We're going to pass them an array of all of these greeters so that they can all say hello. So that's what I'm thinking. And because I want all of these instances to do a thing, I'm going to assign that responsibility to the class itself. Okay, so now what might I put in here? Does anyone want to come off mute and help me explore inside of this method? Travis?
Sure. I enjoy this self stuff. It's fun to try to figure out. I'm thinking all, since all is an array, we can iterate over all.
Okay.
So all dot, oh shoot. Yeah, let's do each. And then the do, and then the block would be name or user or something.
What does each element represent?
A new user, a user.
Not a user. What class am I in?
Oh, a greeter. Oh, a greeter.
Yeah, a greeter. Awesome.
So greeter dot. Oh.
Can I pause you for a second, Travis?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you very much. And we'll come back. I just want to explore inside of this block for a second. So I am invoking this method down here on line 30. So we should hit that pry. Great. So we can see now our greeter is what? What is this? Priya? I wasn't sure if you were like doing that today.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was. It's the Bob object, the instance of the greeter.
Yeah, definitely. You said that and someone else said it too. Sorry, I didn't catch who said that. But yeah, it's just a greeter instance. And we know how to work with instances, right? So Travis, what were you thinking would be my next step here to have this greeter instance say hello?
Call the instance method. So greeter dot say hello.
Yeah, exactly. Right, and we have a puts, right? Puts returns no. Perfect, right? So even inside of a class method, if we have an instance, an individual instance, like what we do here in this block variable, we can still call these instance methods on the instance. Is that getting mind bendy yet? So we can replace this with greeter dot say hello, right? Because now every instance we go through, we are now invoking this instance method of say hello. So when we call this class method, I would expect all of them to say hello. Should we try it? Woohoo. Right? We have a repetition because I have the say hello up here, but they all went through and said their name. Right? So even though this is a class method, we can still call instance methods from within if we've got a block, if we have a single instance. Okay, questions?
Kat,
Yes.
do classes come with other like built-in methods that might already know like what instances have been made? So do we have to create that array of Bob, Jane, June, April, or does greeter already know that somehow?
That is a great question. My answer is no for now. In Mod 2, you will be introduced to a database, and that database will store all these instances for you. Right now, though, we do not have that, and so we're kind of going to do some work to mimic that, and that's kind of what we're doing with these CSV files, right? We're reading in this data and storing it in a way that we can access that data because we are not working with the database right now. So, great question. To be continued. All right, so let's experiment with something else. So here we called an instance method from inside our class method. What if we wanted to call, oh, we kind of did this already, a class method from a class method? Like if I wanted a method, a class method, for whenever we have a new hire, so a new greeter gets onboarded, we want the class itself to welcome them or to say hello. So take 10 seconds and think to yourself, what code should go inside line 23? If when I call this class method, I want it to actually, call this method and put hello when we have a new hire. So think to yourself for a second. Hash, do you want to come off mute and share what you think we might be able to put here?
Could you just put the self.sayHello method?
Interesting. So if we did self.sayHello?
Yeah.
Okay. I have a couple questions for you.
Sure.
Right? You didn't know what you're getting into. Have we ever seen like this before where we call a method on self?
No.
Okay. Why did you think to do that then?
I don't know. I guess just because with every new hire, you're saying you were wanting them to say hello, so just call to that other method, I guess.
Yeah. You're not wrong. You're very correct, actually. I'm just wondering what your thought process was.
Yeah, no doubt.
Let's see. I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but I do want to explore this for just a second. Did I invoke this method? No. So let's call this method and see what's going on here. New hire. Okay, so new hire. What? This is weird. What if I type self and hit enter? What do you think will happen? Has any of you explored this yet? This might be way down a different rabbit hole, but let's just press enter and see what self is. What is that?
The class itself?
Yes, the class itself. Okay, so Hash, you're right on, because if self is the class itself, then calling self.sayHello would be the same as calling greeter.sayHello, right? Which is hello. self dot say hello, same thing. What if I just type in say, oh gosh, these words have no meaning to me now. What if I just type in say hello? Make a guess, what'll happen? Same thing.
Is
I
that
love that.
because like because you're in Greeter and it's saying say hello, so the first thing it's gonna do is access self, which is Greeter? Okay.
Yep. So self, this is correct essentially, but it's not necessary because in Ruby, the self dot is actually implied before a method call. So since we're already inside of a class method, self refers to the class itself. And so we can call other class methods just by their class method name. Okay. Just like with an instance method, like if you had say hello and like maybe we, oh, well, let's say that what is this? This is an adder reader, which is a method, right? So here we're actually calling an instance method from an instance method just by calling the other name of the method. Ooh, here's another fun one for you. Okay, let's exit here. Okay, now I'm inside of this. What is self going to be right now? What kind of method am I in? Think about that. Okay, you ready for me to press enter? Self is now the greeter object, right? Because I'm inside of an instance method. So self is actually the instance we call the method on. So it's referring to Bob right here, right? Because this method was invoked by calling it on this specific instance. So inside the instance method, Bob is self, which actually means the self.name still gives Bob, just like calling just the method name. Let me say this real quick. If this self stuff inside of the method is totally throwing you off, that's okay. Don't worry about it. That is like a nice to know. You'll learn more about it later. Okay. All right. But the point I want to make with that is that when you're inside an instance method, you can call other instance methods just by calling the method name. You don't need anything in front of it. We don't need to say like Bob dot, which wouldn't work anyways, but you don't need to say self dot. Okay, same idea with a class method. If you're inside of a class method, you can call other class methods just by the method name. You don't have to include the self dot, and you don't want to do the greeter dot. It's just redundant. It's not necessary. Okay. Questions? So now when we do this again, let's comment out, well, we can comment out everything actually and just run this new hire. And we would expect new hire to just call this class method. I would expect it to just put hello. And it does, so we're good. Okay, questions? Okay, take about 3 minutes right now and just in your journal, in your notebook, in your text editor where you're keeping notes, explain the difference between a class method and an instance method, both in the syntax, how you call it, how you invoke the method, and how you might explain it to someone, to a peer or on an interview. Okay, so take about 3 minutes to do that. I'll write these questions here. I didn't catch it in time. That's really obnoxious. I'll do better. Okay, so we're gonna move on now to the pre-work that I had you do. So if you, hopefully y'all did it. If not, your breakout room can help you get set up. But go ahead, open up that directory where you imported the CSV file and created a file called name. And then you should already have this code in it. Yes? Go ahead, give me a thumbs up if this looks like what you've got going on. All right, awesome. If you weren't able to get to that, that's okay. Stick with me in this lesson, right, or this for the next 5 minutes or so for an explanation. And then when we go into the breakout rooms, we can help you get set up if you didn't get that pre-work done, but it is in your cohort channel. All right, so this goes back to kind of what Angela was alluding to, that like, how are we keeping track of all this information? Like, we don't have a database yet. So this is kind of helping us access all this information via CSV files right now. Okay, and this actually is a really good study, because in Mod 2, you're going to have something called Active Record, which is going to give you access to a database and have so many built-in methods. But that abstracts a little bit of what that method's doing, how it's working, what's going on under the hood. So being able to build these methods with the CSV data will give you some insight into how those methods in Mod 2 are working. Okay, so just keep that in mind. So, all right, so we've got a class here. This right here, I don't know if you've all seen this before, the two @ signs. It looks like an instance variable. It's actually called a class variable. We're not going to use them too often, but we're going to use them in this scenario so that we don't have to type this in every time. Okay. Trying to think of how much I wanted to say. All right, so you're going to have some tasks that I will put in your Slack channel to work with in breakout rooms. And what we'll do is we'll work for about 10 minutes. We'll come together and discuss, and then you'll go back into breakout rooms and work probably for about another 20 minutes, if I can time it that way. So, but here, I just want to explore this really quickly here. So this is a class method, right? We know now because the method name is defined with the self dot, find by name, okay? So because we're looking through all the information of name, whenever we have a name instance, to find the specific instance we're looking for, we need to look through all the instances. So that responsibility would go to the class. It wouldn't be a specific instance's responsibility to know about any other instance's names. Okay, so that's why it's a class method. We're going to read in some CSV data, as I'm sure you're all getting very good at. What this method should return are any instances, any name instances where the name matches this name. And don't worry about what's going on exactly. It'll be in the breakdown of your tasks that you are to complete. But I want to show you here what this rows looks like. So if I run this file, oops. Uh-oh, what did I run the wrong?
The instance variables are not set to anything, or is that supposed to be that way?
No, it is because of that, I think. Yeah, the initialized variables.
Oh, yep. Okay, let me just do this. You'll build this out, don't you worry. Awesome, thank you so much for that. So let's look at rows really quick and what that is. So we're reading in a bunch of CSV data from this specific file that's in your directory from that pre-work. And so if we look at the rows, okay, well, that's not too helpful, but let's look at this. So if we do rows 0, we get some information. Okay, so when we read in this data like this via CSV, it's not actually an array, but it responds to some methods that arrays respond to. Okay, so one of those being we can access each and every element. Okay, and so this, when I pull out that first element from this rows variable, what does this kind of look like? What does this remind you of? What data structure?
Instance variables.
Hashes.
hashes, right? Not instance variables yet, but maybe we want them to be instance variables. So if we have a hash, how would I access the value of rank? If row 0 returns to me this hash-like structure, let's just say it's a hash, how would I access the value of 75?
Call in the key.
Rank.
Call on the key. Yeah, so what would that look like?
Square bracket, rank. Colon, rank. Rank, colon, rank, colon, rank.
That didn't work.
String, rank.
Yeah, there you go. Perfect. Right, so remember, keys are unique. You need to match what the key looks like. All right, so this data that's coming in via CSV in the rows variable is holding something that you can think of as an array. Okay, and then each element, you can think of that as being a hash. And that's how you'll interact with these objects. Okay, all right. Questions? I'm going to post in your channel the stuff I want you to do. Okay, and you're going to build out this method to get back, take an argument of a name, and it should return back any name instances, right? It should return name instances that match the name that was passed in as an argument. Okay. Sorry, I need to not prepare my breakout rooms. So give me 2 seconds to do that. Uh-oh.
Kat, have you ever seen the error no such file or directory at rb_sys open?
Probably it could be if you're trying to run a file from the wrong location or the paths are incorrect. But I'll pop into the breakout rooms to see what errors are coming up. So I'm going to give you 10 minutes to work on this first method. And then if you finish it with your group, explore what other methods might be useful or other things that you can do. But then we'll come back in here, discuss, and then we'll take a palm before we do more breakout rooms. Okay, so Ashlam, I just released all the breakout rooms. Okay, so we're back in here. I know some of you were able to complete that. Some of you not, that is okay. I want to come together and talk about the solution to this one though, and then we'll take a palm and then you'll have more time to practice in breakout rooms with some other scenarios. I would love to, can you see my screen without, I took all my instance variables away? Yeah, okay, awesome. So cool. Austin, if you're okay with coming off mute and sharing, I would love to know like what your thought process was and what you all did to solve this.
So we didn't necessarily get all the way through.
That's okay.
And the first thing we did was try to assign the instance variables.
Okay, how'd you do that?
By first dropping into Pry and seeing what all of the like the headers were for, so the year of birth string and the gender string, all of those.
Yeah.
And so in our, all our instance variables, so for year, we said data, square bracket, in string year of birth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
awesome,
then,
because you knew this is a hash.
Mm-hmm.
Oh gosh, I don't know what happened there. So we can access each of these keys to access their value and set those as our instance variables, right?
Yep.
Awesome. And then we do need to match, remember, string keys are, oh my gosh. You know what, for sake of time, I'm going to comment a couple of these out just for right now. Actually, I don't think I can do that. All right, and then, ooh, this one though, right? It's child's first name. Actually, I think I might, will I get an error? I don't know, let's try it. I don't know if I'll get an error. Okay, so now I'm in this pry. We've established some instance variables so that eventually I can instantiate, right? And so what did you think to do next potentially?
So now it would be, we would call rows.each do.
Oh, maybe I'll do it in here. Okay.
And then in there, row.
Awesome.
And yeah.
Should we, let's run it and look at where we're at right now. Awesome, so we're inside here. I can see if I type row to see what my my block variable is, that now I have that hash looking structure, which I said you can just treat as a hash. Okay, so then what did you do to this at this point?
This is about where we got stuck.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for sharing, Austin. And then let's have, so Logan, did your group get any further than this?
Yeah, we did actually.
Okay, so yeah, go ahead.
But we used a find all instead of an each.
Okay. Okay, how did you do that?
I'm trying to think. I don't have the code in front of me, so.
Oh, sorry. Whoever was your screen share, maybe they can like help since they have the code.
Hi. Sorry. Where were we at? Or we're here. Are you still in your pry?
I am still in my pry.
Cool. And in our pry, we were like, okay, well, can we hit row and then child's first name? Calling the key, sorry, child's first name and string.
Oops.
Ooh. And since we saw we could pull that way, we dropped that bit of info at your line 22.
Okay.
And we set that equal to the name. And at first, I'm going to admit, like the first thing we did was actually put Megan the string, and then Logan was like, dudes, we've got a past and param of name, so we can just put name. Since I think it was Sean, maybe it was Corey, noted that on your Slack post that Ian was not capitalized, we also did name dot upcase, and it is a double equal.
There you go, because we're not setting it equal to, right?
Sorry, we're querying, okay.
Comparing it.
And then we have an end. Cool.
Okay.
And we had to make an adjustment because it was a find all. We set result directly equal to rows.
Wait. Oh, like, right here? Okay.
And technically remove that, but yeah. And to make sure we could print it, we also have a puts like there are result.length string interpolation instances of the name, blah, blah, blah. So we could actually print out. I can put that in the chat. But yeah, so.
Question for you though.
Love it.
So this will, what will this return though? Because what did we want to return from this method?
We actually, so that was I was a little confused reading your Slack. So you wanted to know the number of counts, right? So we did that in pry. And then afterwards, that's where that in the chat, the additional puts so that we can actually count out. So the result.length.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm realizing now, like, we were like, oh, hey, there's 15 instances of Megan showing up. And we thought we had hit it, but rereading it, realized you actually wanted us to print the total number of instances that Megan was appearing or Ian was appearing. Am I correct?
Well, almost. So I did want to know how many rows of data, but it's the actual method should build an array of name objects that match the name column. Right? So you're very close here.
Okay.
What else, what can we do to this just to fix it? And actually, I want to put this back. Here, for the sake of time, I always run out of time. Let's do it like this. Let's say, oh goodness. So we're going through each of them. your groups and Austin's group to like use an iterator is right on here since we have an array of CSV data. And we are concerned with this specific information to make sure it matches the name given. Since I don't know how this data is coming in from either place, I might just upcase or downcase both sides of it just to make sure my data will always match. Right, so if this is true, then I want to take that information and instantiate, right? So now we can do a name.new, and what should I pass it?
The row.
The row, right? Because that's just this hash structure. And our .new is already written here for us to take care of pulling apart this hash-like structure and taking out, querying the specific keys. However, here, right, .each will return itself, or it returns the original array. We want to put these into our results array, right? So now we should.
Result on line 23 be singular?
Yes, ma'am, sure should. And actually, I think I like the name of this as results better. So let's change it to plural, right? An array is holding a collection of data. So this should be all of our results. So if actually, let me put this here. If we drop into a price session down here, we should be able to find, to do this. So find by name, Megan. Looks like an array of a lot of name instances. And if I see how many I have, I've got 20 of those. Okay. All right. So you could use find all here and find all the matches, but then you have to do another iteration through that find all return value to then instantiate. So I actually really do like each here to go through this and just check and do the thing. What questions do you have about this code, how it works, what it's doing?
Kat,
Yes.
Because you're in like a class method, do you have to reference name on line 23, or could you just do new?
That is a great question. What do you all think? Remember what I had said earlier, that when you're calling a class method from a class method, you can just call it by name. So do you think this will still work? Let's test it, right? When we don't know, let's just test it. So name.find by name, we'll pass it Megan again. And let's just do a .count on the results. I still get 20, right? And so here we can look at those. Yeah, yep, exactly. Like you don't have to do that because a class method can call a class method by name, right? In this case with the new, I don't know, I kind of torn on which way I think is easier to read, but you don't have to have it.
Okay.
Great question. Anything else about either how we read the CSV data, why this is a class method? Because although we are working with some CSV stuff now, I do want us to remember that this class is about class methods.
Could I ask one more question?
Of course.
For the CSV, right here, you're instantiating, like you read and you instantiate the objects for this specific method. Mm-hmm. Would you read all of the CSV and instantiate them all into objects, and then for every method you don't have to turn them into instances?
That sounds like a wonderfully efficient solution.
Okay. All right.
I'm going to leave it at that. Okay. I would love for your breakout groups to explore some of the other methods. We're definitely over in terms of a POM though. So do you want to just go into the breakout rooms and explore a little more? Because then you have project work time after this. Yeah, okay. Let's just do that. If you need a POM though, please let's just turn your camera off for a couple minutes and take a POM. But I'm going to put you back in your breakout room so you can continue to explore the rest of the items that I put in the Slack channel. We won't come back together to discuss those, but I'll pop into your breakout rooms to see what questions are coming up, okay? Awesome. All right, I just want to wrap up here by asking if any questions came up. So we'll take 2 questions. Travis?
Yeah, so I'm trying to think of how to ask this. The convenience of how we were doing it, which is essentially you're creating a new you're creating a new object on line 23 every time, rather than just turning every row into an array. Or I don't know if that's what I want to ask. I think that is, because I think in my project I was doing that because I didn't know how to do this. So what's the benefit there?
This is a great question, right? Because coding, a lot of it is about trade-offs. Here's what I'll tell you. Importing in CSV data is rather expensive in terms of processing power. Okay, so that would be the benefit to importing it all in at once, instantiating every item, and then holding those instances somewhere for later use. That could be the benefit. But maybe you're only gonna, maybe this is all you're doing with that single CSV, maybe this is the only thing your class is going to do with that data, then in that sense, I think this makes more sense. No need to instantiate everything, just the ones that you need. So I think it's just important to think about the scope of what's going on, right? It depends is the answer, but it's great to balance out these trade-offs.
Yeah, because I'm thinking if a person, like let's say, I don't know, somebody else, not me, initialized reading the file and then use that variable that it's set to as this. I mean, it's kind of like doing the same thing, but it's not an object. You're just dealing with separate arrays.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and which is also expensive, right? Iterating over arrays is actually expensive as well. So here's what I'll say in general, the least amount of times you can import CSV data and the least amount of times you can iterate through an entire array, the more efficient your program will be. So I don't know if that helps or not. So, okay, awesome, great. All right, we have one more quick question. Okay, then we'll close up. You definitely have gone a very long time without a palm, so please spend the next 10 minutes away from your computer, moving around, stand up. All right, and then I will get this posted as quickly as I can.